open the room. Hi, everyone on YouTube. Welcome to our book study, and welcome back, everyone that is part of the book study, and thank you for re-registering so that you could join us. I know that we had a little glitch with Zoom. I still don't know what happened, except that they were trying to help me and didn't realize they were deleting all of the registrants to the book study group. But we'll get it straight. It will be back on track pretty soon. And thank you for coming back to join with us. And thank you, Jenny Beal, for always being our host and co-host and an important part of this book study. Jenny, you have really made this book study an important place and a resource that many of us appreciate.
Thank you, Bill. It's lovely to be here. I really enjoy being with all of you and seeing all your faces at the top of the screen.
Thank you. And we're looking at this week, we're looking on page 182. I think I put 181 in the notification, but it's 182 to 188, and that will complete chapter 13. And in 2 weeks, if you don't already know this, no, that'll complete chapter 12, sorry. In 2 weeks, if you don't already know this, Francis will be here live on July 20th, so mark your calendar and formulate your question. And let's get started. Jenny, where would you like to look at on 182? You want to look at the first question at the top of the page?
Oh, okay, yes. So the first question is a question directly to Francis. If you were enlightened, would you still be here on this earth? And Francis explains that neither he nor the questioner is on this earth. The body and the mind are in consciousness, and human body minds don't become enlightened, and no separate entity becomes enlightened. But then the questioner tries another tack and goes on, your body is the form that channels this teaching that relates. And Francis makes this beautiful statement. The message is that the origin of the message is not the channel, that the receiver of the message is not the receiving channel, and that the origin and the receiver of the message are one and the same. It's very beautiful. And you know, when you have a dialogue with Francis, you feel that. And so he's coming along as you mentioned, Bill, on the 20th. So if anyone wants to ask a question, then yes, it's a good idea to prepare your question in advance, to think through what you want to ask. But it's really great to come online and actually have a dialogue with him, and that's what he likes to do, rather than just answering written questions.
Yeah, I love, you know, I'm very happy that these questions were, you know, they're just so pointed, and Francis comes back like an arrow, you know, just
Yes.
right to the center of the target, and answers it in such clarity. I love the first answer. I am not on this earth, and neither are you. I mean, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so you know, that really does put it in perspective. I'm not on this earth, and neither are you. So, you know, each one of us can take that in and go, oh yeah, because I'm not Bill. I mean, yeah, the voice that's speaking seems to be Bill, but we're not speaking about that, really.
Yes, Bill is just a label for a body mind, a human body mind. That's all. But the earth and all the creatures on it are within ourselves.
Yes, you know what? That's very interesting that you just said that, because I was saying to Jenny before the show, we interviewed, or I hosted Isira from Australia yesterday in our presenter series, and he gave a beautiful meditation. We're going to make it available for free because it was so beautiful. I didn't want anyone to miss it. And I'll make sure and send it out. It was the inclusion of our oneness with all the trees and the insects and the animals, and the total presence of what God is, and really the name God is just a name for what can't be named. And I loved hearing you say that just now, Jenny, because it's just a reminder of that everything is the oneness that Francis points to in that answer to that second question.
Yes, yes. And going out and being in nature really helps us to recognize that. We feel that when we see the beauty of the trees and the animals.
I still can't believe what you're saying. Jenny, the other thing that Isira said was to go outside barefoot and connect with these things. It's like you were there. Okay. So the next question is that comes after the last one you gave. It says, if everything is God's will, then whether we are happy or unhappy is not under our will. Likewise, would we have control over dropping concepts or not? And Francis, goes right in and says, your question is based upon the assumption that what you call we is a body mind. If that is so, then what you say is true.
Yes.
He totally goes right to the heart of the of the statement, which is it's a question masquerading as a statement. And it goes along with the statement that, I don't know if he actually said it, but they say that Jesus said, whatsoever a man or woman, whatsoever a man thinks in his heart, so is she. And
Yes.
that goes hand in hand with that. If you think you're a body mind experience, then your statement will be true.
Yes, you will see things from that perspective, and really, it's one of those classic questions. If I've got no power to choose and I can't do anything, then what's the point of this teaching? And that's, I think, in a way where the questioner was coming from. But he's saying that if you recognize that you are that which perceives, then you have complete freedom. So this teaching is actually about that recognition, and the recognition of the universality of the perceiver. We are the ultimate perceiver.
Hmm. And actually, it does prove out free will.
Yeah.
If the free will of being ignorant, if we choose.
Exactly. Yes. 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 If we consciousness chooses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You want to go on with that, or would you like to go to the mirror?
Right. Yes. Let's go to the mirror. So the question is, so our happiness or unhappiness, enlightenment or unenlightenment, all in the body mind realm. And yes, I mean, they are concepts that arise in the body mind realm, as he says. But then he uses this lovely analogy of a mirror, and he says states are irrelevant to consciousness, just as a mirror is completely immune to the images that are reflected in it. They may be pleasant or terrible, but the mirror remains totally unaffected by the reflections. A violent scene reflected in the mirror is not going to destroy the mirror. That's the freedom of the mirror. So he's saying we are the mirror. We're not the states of body and mind that are reflected in it. We talk about enlightened sages, but actually there are no enlightened persons. And he goes on, all states have the sole purpose of taking us back to our true nature. And then, having recognized it, it is for us to celebrate our eternal freedom.
Yeah, I love the analogy of the mirror, just because when you just reflect on that, it- you recognize that the only thing that changes is your perception of what's in the mirror. The only thing that the mirror never changes. It's only the image that comes and goes.
Yes, yes.
Hmm. He says there's a statement under that one. It says it feels as though it is something within, and that's where he says if you are invited by the source, just say yes. Don't ask questions. What is he talking about here?
Yes, I think he's meaning don't argue with it. So, I mean, there's no need to bemoan the times when you seem to lose touch with your true nature and fall into ignorance. There's no need to, if you're invited, in other words, if you recognize, for a moment I forgot who I really was. You don't argue with that and that invitation by saying, "Oh, that's dreadful." You simply respond to the invitation, because the falling into ignorance and the falling back to our true nature are all natural occurrences, and they're all the activity of consciousness.
You're right, 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 right.
We tend to think of one being bad and the other not being, but
Yes,
we really ultimately we have to get rid of this notion of good and bad.
yes, yes. That's a hard one.
Yes.
That's a
Yeah.
hard one, because and most often people will come in, well, what about blah blah blah,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The next question says, you say that we should just be happy, but it is challenging to be happy all the time. And then he comes in and answers, and I guess the same questioner has another response that says that requires vigilance. So Francis comes back with that first question and says, it's not challenging to be happy, it is challenging to be unhappy. And I would say that it actually takes a lot more energy to be unhappy.
I think so. Francis tells this lovely story of three old ladies who used to meet every Tuesday and have lunch together at the same restaurant. They always moan about everything and complain about things, and it's because they enjoy doing it. And he says that's why we stay in misery, we stay in ignorance because we enjoy it. And one day the waiter said to them, asked them, "Is anything all right, ladies?"
Funny.
It seems to
The
be a human characteristic, isn't it? Enjoying seeing the negative and moaning about the negative.
Yeah, some people swim in that swimming pool
Yeah,
more than
yes,
others.
yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah. The statement that Francis answers that requires vigilance. Vigilance sounds challenging to me. What about surrender, abandonment? Surrender your fear, surrender everything you believe. You have to sooner or later. You cannot take your belief systems with you when you pass away. So why not surrender them now? Surrender your beliefs from moment to moment. Discover the joy of living without attachment to any belief system. I love this.
It's beautiful. You know, in the progressive path I used to follow, we went along with this vigilance thing, which I guess is where the question comes from. So we had to look out for negative thoughts and emotions, or repetitive thought patterns, or gossip, or anything like that, and try to stop it. So we used to call that the small I, or the small self, and trying to stop it required a huge amount of effort. But then, who was making that effort? It was only a believed in separate entity. We thought it was the big self. There was a big self that was making this effort, and it was making this effort to squash the small self. But in fact, it was all just one self playing the game of being a separate entity, both the self having the negative thoughts and the self trying to stop the negative thoughts. It was all just one universal self playing the game of ignorance.
It's more of an unfolding. It's more like a retranslation that occurs. It seems like, because when I look at, and also in a progressive path of A Course in Miracles, it says, "Be vigilant for God." And so for me, vigilance in that term just means just be present and aware. Just be rest in awareness now vigilance sounds like it's working. You got to work this.
Yes, it
But
does.
resting in awareness, resting in as presence, that feels like there's not a doing.
Yes, that's effortless. Yeah.
Right. He says, discover the joy of living without attachment to any belief system. The attachment to beliefs such as happiness requires effort, or it is necessary to suffer in order to be happy, is very deep. There are people who join monastic orders, renounce all their possessions, become celibate, and give up everything except their notion of God. This notion of God becomes their dearest attachment. Human beings are the most attached creatures. In fact, belief systems are nothing. They are quite easy to let go of. They are just paper tigers. It is better to let them go right now and live happily ever after.
Yes, living in not knowing.
Right. And
Yeah.
also sacrifice. The idea of sacrifice in order to find favor with what God is. Sacrifice in order to, and I've actually tried this myself. I've gone the celibate thing. I've gone the being guilty for this or that, and it's all the paper tiger trail.
It is. But you know, the origin of the word sacrifice is just to make sacred. So sacrus and facere, just the Latin, just means to make sacred,
Mm,
which is something quite different, because it's just emphasizing the connection with the universal, the recognition of the universal.
right, right. The next question, and Rick has a question. Let's look at Rick has a question on the board.
All right. Yes.
Can
Yes.
we
Okay.
Can we define, have we come across this question in the book yet, or am I ahead? Am I going
Well,
ahead with
Francis often talks about finding out things experientially, and I think that's what Rick is referring to. Instead of believing, instead of adopting a belief because a sage tells you something, or instead of using a logical process to work out that something is very likely, that we actually check it out for ourselves, and that's what Francis says. But I mean, really, Rick, experientially is very straightforward. It means just try it. That's all it means. I mean, for example, you could look experientially. You could look theoretically at the physics of boiling water, and you could work out that probably water, or almost certainly water, boils at a lower temperature on the top of a tall mountain. Or you could go up a mountain and you could boil a kettle and take a thermometer with you and check the temperature and see that it's lower than 100 degrees centigrade. So, that's really the difference. It's practical. It's absolutely everyday and practical, and it doesn't rely on any beliefs, doesn't rely on any a prioris. It's everything is straightforward. But he does talk about those two paths: the path of the mathematician and the path of the physicist. And the path of the physicist is the experiential one, but there's equally a role and a way of progressing on the path of the mathematician, which is the one to going deeply in your intelligence into something, and that's more like this noumenal experience, but bringing that noumenal experience into some kind of logical framework.
Well, experiential seems like, and I'm I'm glad that you're the math whiz, and uh, and you understand those terms in the way that you just described, because you're able to have your own direct experience of what that statement means that Francis said. And the other side of that is, for me, experientially, that's the proof that Rupert points to when he says that investigate this for yourself. When you ask the question, what is it that is aware of this experience, that is taking it from a belief to a direct experience. Experientially, you know for yourself. The proof is visceral. It's something that you connect with knowingly.
Yes, it can be, or you can just read in a book. What is the answer to that question? You can read in a book. It's consciousness. I am that which is aware of my experience. That is consciousness, and then that stays theoretical. Or you can actually go there in your experience, and that word, it's one of the words that Francis says takes you directly to its referent. Awareness, consciousness, surrender, love, freedom, all of those words take you directly to their referent. And so that's where the experiential side of it comes in. And that's why Rupert asks you that question. What is it that is aware of my experience? Because by answering that question, what is it that is aware, then the operative word is aware, and that word aware takes you to its referent.
Yeah. You have your own proof. It's not something,
Yes,
it's no longer something that you believe because you heard it or read it or somebody said it.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's another question from Helen. When we see seeming others in a so-called negative state, has this body mind fallen into ignorance?
Well, not necessarily. No. If it depends whether she means the other people are experiencing a negative state, or whether she is experiencing a negative state, or responding negatively to it. So, but in both cases, not necessarily. So if we see others who are agitated, or being aggressive, or lying, then yes, the ignorance is present there, but it's not necessarily present in that which is observing. Well, it isn't present in that which is observing that behavior. But equally, if we are feel a sense of anger, which is a negative emotion, when we see someone hurting another person, then again, that's not necessarily ignorance. That's a natural reaction. It's only ignorance. Ignorance is only ever the belief in being a separate entity, and belief in being separate from other people. If there's always that knowledge and that understanding that we are not, then it's not ignorance.
Thank you for that explanation, Jenny. And as we look at page, going on to the bottom of page 184, the second paragraph, it says, it seems as though the root of this sticky substance that makes bliss come and go is seeking some protection from the fear.
Yes, yes.
Francis says, it seems, Francis says, I don't sell fear insurance. Ah, that was good. He says halfway down, there may be inconveniences. Well, let me go back up then. When you go on a skiing holiday or buy a Porsche, there is always some danger involved. When you start a relationship with someone, there is potentially big danger. When you eat food, it could be poisonous. Basically, life is dangerous, but at the same time, it is beautiful. It is interesting. If you travel to an exotic country, it is exciting precisely because it is exotic. There may be inconveniences, but there is a thrill about it. Likewise, there is a thrill in this spiritual journey, the thrill of discovering your fear, going beyond it, and on top of that, there is no danger. In fact, it is the only thing in life that is not dangerous. Everything else threatens you at every moment. There is no risk. On the contrary, it will keep you safe. You have got it upside down. It is your current attitude that is dangerous. To take this interesting journey into this exotic land called fear is not dangerous.
Yes.
That's a very interesting, intriguing, and powerful flip.
It is, and I think it's quite difficult initially when you come to this teaching, because people want something firm to cling on to. They want a set of beliefs. So it can be very hard to let go of all beliefs. And when it's suggested that they do that, then this fear arises. But I think certainly what I found was the secret is to depersonalize those beliefs. So look at them in a dispassionate way, like a scientist or a philosopher, and then it does become an exciting journey. I mean, if you think of the thrill that Einstein must have felt when, for example, when he recognized that time had no absolute existence. He developed the theory of relativity as a result of that. But that was that was an insight. That was a recognition, and there must have been a tremendous thrill to that. But in a way, that kind of turns our life upside down. Just the recognition that time's not a primary property of the universe. So it's getting past that fear of letting go of what we thought we knew.
And fear is a big one. Fear has so many tentacles. It has so many, because it's attached to all of these different experiences that are registered and held firmly as a belief.
Yes, yeah.
He says, it hurts me to witness a harmful act. There's a question. And Francis says, you want the world to be different. And I think this could be, many of us would have this, would have to say yes to this. You want the world to be different. Let us assume that you were given the power to erase the world as it is and reconstruct it as you would like it to be. No wars, no tyrants, no mosquitoes, no cancer, no pain, and everybody smiles. You would end up with something that is very boring, something with no flavor. Then you start adding a bit of salt and pepper, and at the end, you would be back where you started, having realized that it was perfect the way it was. The only
Yes.
reason, go ahead.
We discussed this in an earlier chapter, didn't we? There's it was in chapter 6 on page 91. He said, if we think there is a problem with the world, we have a problem. We are not the problem. We are freedom. And that was beautiful.
Yes. Yes. And I like I mean, when you really accept Francis's take and response to these ideas, to these questions, which are typical, it really softens the experience. It just brings, oh, okay. Okay. And he says the only reason that the world seems imperfect is because of death. And look at what we do when something dies, someone dies. We go, oh my God, so and so died. And whether it's a person, an animal, we pause and we say, oh my God, and we give attention to that idea that there's something that should be different. I mean, I would say I do that. It says, Francis says, as long as you believe in the reality of death, the world will be a problem. It will never be perfect. The problem is not suffering or misery. It is the belief that you are a body mind and are therefore going to die. If you realize that death is not real, then somehow the world will appear in a totally different light. And for me, the idea is the idea of the person that is having a dialogue with the person that says that my dog died or my child died. The person that's having the dialogue is definitely a person having the dialogue. It's the person that has understanding and allows that understanding to speak for them is where the differences lies. When that understanding, like when you respond to someone with compassion, you wouldn't say, "Oh well, it's not real. It's just death doesn't really happen." You would never say that. You would pause and allow wisdom to come in and speak in behalf of love, I feel.
Yes, I think so too. It's it's natural when a friend or an animal that you love dies. You're going to miss that companionship, aren't you? And that's an arising in consciousness, which is part of the pattern of the universe, how it works. Grief is a perfectly natural emotion, and so it wouldn't be right to say, oh well, nothing dies, because yes, from a human perspective, then body minds do die, whether they're animal minds or animal body minds or human body minds. They do die, but what's important is the understanding that we are not that, and when that creature dies, everything that it had brought you, that had communicated with you, is still there. Everything it meant to you is still there.
Yeah, yeah. It's the belief that we're losing something that we never lose.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. He said something, I don't see that I've marked it, but he said to do something with fear when it comes that I thought was very interesting. Do you know where that is?
Um,
He said just allow fear to just be what it is, or where did he say that?
yes, let me have a look.
But I like the idea. In fact, when I first found the Course in Miracles, coming from a long time Christian background, fear would come in and I wouldn't know what it was. I wouldn't know. Fear would come in. I would sense fear, intense fear. At the time that it was occurring, I would not know why I was fearful, but I could feel the fear. And what I found myself doing was just being aware of, just before I knew Rupert or understood what the direct path pointed to, I would just pause and put my hand on my heart and just watch the fear. I wouldn't try to analyze it or figure it out. I would just be aware of the fear, and then it would just melt away into nothing.
yes, yes. It's actually on page 187. How do I face the fear of death? Which I think is the bit that you're referring to,
Yeah.
and so he starts by saying that any fear, once you unpack it, once you look into it below its surface, is going to be ultimately the fear of the fear of death. So, if you're afraid of flying in aeroplanes, or you're afraid of spiders, or open spaces, or fear of heights, then it's actually quite easy to trace all of those back to a fear of death. It's pretty obvious. But even in a more subtle way, fears like the fear of speaking in public, for example, that also relates to the fear of death, because it's a fear that people will laugh at you or think you're stupid or useless, and it's the death of the intelligent, sensible person that you had imagined yourself to be, and that's what's under threat in those cases. So it's either a literal fear of death of the physical body, or it's a fear of death of what you imagine yourself to be. It's one or the other. And so when you go below it, he says, then you become in touch with that fundamental fear, which is what you were describing, Bill. And if you can welcome it, and if you do welcome it, when you start to do that, then he's saying it can reveal itself as panic, and that panic is based on I thoughts and I feelings. So when Francis, Rupert has a different technique here, but when Francis talks about facing the fear, he's referring to looking at those thoughts and feelings from an impersonal perspective, like a scientist being interested in their origin. And he says it starts going back to peace, layer after layer, until we reach the ultimate level of fear, the root fear. And then beyond that, there is the I, a little thing, a poor thing, the crying child, the basic mistake. This is the mistake from which all other mistakes arise. The identification of consciousness, which is understanding these words right this moment, with a perceived object, with the I thought or the I feeling. The mind cannot go to that root because it is itself a perceived object made of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. The mind is perceived. That which perceives it is beyond it. That is free forever. That is our true nature, our true identity. So when you're facing that fear, yes, you recognize it, you acknowledge it, you see that that is the fear of disappearance, the fear of the fear of death, and then you look, you turn back towards those I thoughts, those I feelings, and question their validity.
How would you question the validity? You would just, because then you're investigating the illusion.
Yes, you are. If you've done the investigation before, which would often have happened, so you've had a glimpse of your true nature before, then you just remind yourself of what you discovered. So it's not a huge, long self-inquiry process. You just go straight back. There. Oh, yes. For a moment, I did. I thought I was this feeling, or I thought I was this limited, fragile, tiny entity. No, I've seen before that I'm not that. Otherwise, if you haven't seen that before, then that's the time to go into a full self-inquiry. But for most people, those kinds of deep fear and panic only arise after they've had a glimpse.
So, I mean, underneath the fear of death, it's not so much the fear that the body dies. it's the fear in many ways. I mean, it's the idea that you're not there.
Yes, it's the idea that I, whatever I is, will disappear.
Yes, yes,
Mm.
yeah. The disappearance of the I.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is why all of us are the moth drawn to the flame.
Yes. And it's also why it's not just enough to recognize I am that which is aware of my experience. I'm not anything that I experience. I'm not a body. I'm not a mind. It's important to go beyond that and to recognize that that awareness that I am is universal, or another way of putting it, which Francis often does, is that there's only one reality. So my reality is the same as the reality of the world.
Mm.
So it's that second recognition really that gets rid of the fear of death, and it disappears after that. It might sort of come back temporarily, but then it's instantaneous to go back to remembering what you've discovered.
Hmm. Yeah. He says at the top of the um, page 187, before the question on the fear of death, there's the question, if there is no one here, why should there be an individual who has to go through a process of achieving anything?
Yes. This question may have come from someone who has been following one of the neo-Advaita teachers, possibly. And they say there's nobody here, there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to do. It's one of their little catchphrases. So it has a kind of question, has a bit of a ring of that, I think.
Yeah.
That he says ultimately there's no individual, there's only the appearance of an individual. It is a play, there's no King Lear and no Hamlet in reality, but for the purpose of the play there is King Lear or Hamlet. So we're talking about two different levels and we shouldn't confuse them.
Mm.
And really what he's pointing to is that our body minds are very well equipped to play whatever role is given to them, and we just need to let them get on with the job without identifying with the role that they're playing. I mean, if you think if an actor completely identifies with the part he's playing, he's not really going to play it that well. He needs to be open to the feelings of the character, certainly, but he needs also to recognize that he is not that character.
Mm.
And
Well,
what's
and
important for us is equally not to invent a new, very spiritual character which we can then go and identify with.
that's what we mostly do. I mean, in the beginning, we take on this spiritual role and
Mm.
identify with it until we don't, until
Yes.
we're, I think what happens is our heart is the heart that is so um, um, interested in knowing the self or the experience. It calls in the energy of itself to resolve those temporary side side roads that we take on the way to awakening. You know, we many of us take, you know, we'll try this and we'll try that and we'll try this other thing. And along the way, it seems like consciousness is self-correcting.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, we think we have to do something, but it's self-correcting.
Yes. Mm.
It's a beautiful thing. But I do love how he really points to the level confusion that's so typical. It's taken this one a while to recognize that shift that takes place, and be able and it seems like it's a gradual unfolding where you can live in that space for a longer and then longer and longer period of time.
Yes. Have you ever done any acting, Bill?
No,
No. Yeah.
no, never have.
I have. It was something I was very keen on when I was at university,
Okay.
and it's you do have to really get into the part and feel what the character's feeling, but it's possible to well, it just happens that it is like that. Eventually, your body mind is just automatically playing a role, but you never ever believe that you are the body mind, and that role is real.
Hmm. Well, I wouldn't know, but I'm sure that, I mean, some of the movies that you watch, you know that character is that character. So to immerse yourself so fully into that character role, so that your audience believes you that you're that person. I'm sure that could be something that would be hard to, you might have to spend a couple of days undoing that identity.
Yes, it's I think it's called method acting, isn't it? Where you completely believe you're that role. But I think the greatest actors um, always know, always have that kind of inner sense of not being that role, even when they're playing it. Francis's favorite film is called Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and he it's very obvious in that film that they're not method acting, but at the same time the acting is brilliant.
Oh, cool. I think I've heard that before, but I haven't seen the movie, but I'll have to look it up.
It's a very old movie, and it's very funny, and he says that this is the in his view, this is the best movie of all time. So.
Oh, cool. It says, Anne says, do we need to me to the realization that activities don't take us to happiness by trying to do it repeatedly and failing?
I think it's what happens, and that goes back to Rick's question about experiential understanding. So we can experiment all the time by trying to find um, happiness in activities or in relationships or in possessions or in having a job or being well thought of, all of those things. And we eventually, if we do enough experiments, I think we're probably bound to come to the conclusion that happiness doesn't lie there.
Well, it's all in the pull to access our natural state.
Mm.
So we think that this is going to bring me to our natural state, and this never will, because we've given an object of experience an identity that it's a false identity of our
Yes,
true self.
yes, yeah.
It says, Rick says, it's obvious when an actor or actress is trying do too much in a given role, it lacks an authenticity. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, I would not want to be married to me if I was an actor because I would be bringing that thing home all the time. Oh my God, that would be so crazy.
Well, there was a
Oh
time
boy.
when I was doing a theatre tour with a theatre company in South Africa, and I was playing one role, just a Shakespearean role of a woman who was incredibly competent and solved all the problems one night, and then the following night I was playing in a drama called Barasad, which was about a lunatic asylum, and my only role was to lie in front of the stage crying all the time and being completely helpless. So it solved any kind of problems like that.
Were you with Richard then?
No, I wasn't.
Oh,
I
okay.
wasn't.
'Cause, I mean, just
I was touring
that
with a university company.
if you had a partner, don't you know you would come home practicing your role?
um, and it's like bringing work home. When you, I mean, when we were working, we didn't tend to bring work
Okay.
home. We were playing we were playing a role at work, and a very different role from the role of being married to each other.
Yeah.
And yeah, we didn't tend to bring it. It would have been boring, and unless there was some technical issue that I could help him with, or he would help me with. But apart from that, not normally.
Right. Well, we only have about 3 minutes left, and the very last question in this chapter is, or no, the second to the last question. I am very lazy. I love the idea that I don't have to do anything. And yet, if I don't do anything and just sit at home, and then it trails off, it doesn't finish the question. And Francis says, your understanding of doing nothing is incomplete. Doing nothing doesn't mean not doing anything that your ego dislikes. For instance, not making any effort means to understand that thinking, in most cases, is an effort. That everything, any action, thought, or feeling that comes from the notion that you are separate is an effort. To stop all effort means to stop all action, thought, or feeling that comes from conflict, from a fragment, from fragmentation. The only way it can be stopped is by understanding that such a thought, activity, or feeling cannot take you to happiness. As long as you have the slightest belief that personal activity can take you to happiness, you will keep generating such activities. And then it goes on to say that you just stay there from time from you just stay there from there magically. Let me back up. You have to be totally convinced, and then you will find yourself in a state that is very innocent, that could almost be described as a state of stupidity. Because when the mind goes silent, it feels stupid. However, in this case, the stupidity has been brought about by the highest understanding. You just stay there, and from there, magically, you know all you need to know and receive all you need to receive, and you give all you need to give. In this knowing, receiving, and giving, there is great happiness, living from moment to moment in unknowing.
It's a huge reversal for most of us, because when we were young, we were taught it was important to make efforts to pass exams, to get a good job, to get promoted in our job. and so everything was about effort, and it seemed to work. So what we're doing now is learning something quite different.
Yeah. And it's an interesting idea that sort of reveals itself in a way that you can trust it. In a way that, and it's not because you trust it blindly, it's because it reveals itself just as Francis describes, in a knowing. You just know.
Yes,
And, and it,
you just try it. You just you just do stop all of the action that comes from a belief in being separate, or being as he puts it, a fragment, and you just try it and see what happens. So there's no need to believe in it.
yeah.
Just try.
Well, we've come to the end of the chapter and our time together. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for your questions and your comments. Thank you for re-registering so that we can give you notifications. And we'll see you next week for chapter 13, Peace, the Universal Container. And thank you, Jenny. Good to be with you again. You all have a beautiful week, and we'll see you next Tuesday.